mics. Thanks for reminding me. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Purikacharya Ashtotar Tadashi Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Purikacharya Ashtotar Tadashi Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktavinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 14th day of March 2023 in San Diego, reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace HG Dravida Swami Prabhupada. And we are still in chapter 13, Nature, the Enjoyer, and Consciousness. And I believe we're on text 19. Right? Okay. And that should be on page 550. Iti Chaitram Tata Jnanam Geyam Choktam Samasataha Madbhakta Etad Vigyaya Mad Bhavayopapadyate Iti Chaitram Tata Jnanam Geyam Choktam Samasataha Madbhakta Etad Vigyaya Madbhavayopapadyate Iti Chaitram Tata Jnanam Geyam Choktam Samasataha Madbhakta Etad Vigyaya Madbhavayopapadyate Iti Chaitram Tata Jnanam Geyam Choktam Samasataha Madbhakta Etad Vigyaya Madbhavayopapadyate Iti Chaitram Tata Jnanam Geyam Choktam Samasataha Madbhakta Etad Vigyaya Madbhavayopapadyate Iti Chaitram Tata Jnanam Geyam Choktam Samasataha Madbhakta Etad Vigyaya Madbhavayopapadyate Iti Chaitram Tata Jnanam Geyam Choktam Samasataha Madbhakta Etad Vigyaya Madbhavayopapadyate. Iti, thus, Chaitram, the field of activities in the body. Tata, also, Jnanam, knowledge. Geyam, the knowable. Cha, also. Uktam, described. Samasataha, in summary. Mat bhaktaha, my devotee. Etad, all this. Vigyaya, after understanding. Mat bhavaya, to my nature. Upapadyate, attains. Translation. Thus the field of activities, the body, knowledge, and the knowable have been summarily described by me. Only my devotees can understand this thoroughly and thus attain to my nature. Purport. The Lord has described in summary the body, knowledge, and the knowable. This knowledge is of three things: the knower, the knowable, and the process of knowing. Combined, these are called Vigyan, or the science of knowledge. Perfect knowledge can be understood by the unalloyed devotees of the Lord directly. Others are unable to understand. The monists say that at the ultimate stage, these three items become one, but the devotees do not accept this. Knowledge and development of knowledge mean understanding oneself in Krishna consciousness. We are being led by material consciousness. But as soon as we transfer all consciousness to Krishna's activities and realize that Krishna is everything, then we attain real knowledge. Page 550. In other words, knowledge is nothing but the preliminary stage of understanding devotional service perfectly. In the 15th chapter, this will be very clearly explained. Now, to summarize, one may understand that verses 6 and 7, beginning from Mahabhutani and continuing through Chaitanya Dhritihi, analyze the material elements and certain manifestations of the symptoms of life. These combine to form the body, or the field of activities. And verses 8 through 12, from Amanitvam through Tattva Jnanartha Darshanam, describe the process of knowledge for understanding both types of knower of the field of activities, namely the soul and the supersoul. Then verses 13 through 18, beginning from Anadi Matpadam and continuing through Vidisarvastivishtitam, describe the soul and the Supreme Lord, or the supersoul. These three items have been described: the field of activity, the body, the process of understanding, and both the soul and the supersoul. It is especially described here that only the unalloyed devotees of the Lord can understand these three items clearly. So for these devotees, the Bhagavad Gita is fully useful. It is they who can attain the supreme goal, the nature of the Supreme Lord, Krishna. In other words, only devotees, and not others, can understand the Bhagavad Gita and derive the desired result. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakya Chakshur Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So this is an interesting dynamic that I was just thinking of, how knowledge is foundational to our practice of devotional service. And in fact, knowledge is basic to just living in the world. You think about growing up. You're completely ignorant. You don't know anything. Come out of the womb, right? You can't speak. You don't understand anything. And you're completely helpless. You're dependent on those who give you knowledge, beginning with your mother, father, and then teachers. And of course, at the same time, you're gaining your own knowledge, your ability to absorb things from the environment and gain knowledge. And then the basis of the knowledge that you get, you decide what's valuable, what's to do, what's to be avoided, what's pleasurable, what's painful, right? Sometimes that knowledge is very experiential. Prabhupada talks about the little child who really wants to put his hand in the fire, and the father said, no, no, no. And the kid is screaming, and yet I want to, And so finally he lets him touch the fire, and that's the last time. Now he knows, right? He knows that that's not going to be nice. And Prabhupada, a similar thing with the fan. I think Prabhupada went through that with his own child, And then it doesn't really hurt, one little thing, and then you learn. So material life, especially human life, is one of developing knowledge, and on the basis of that knowledge, acting in ways that you seem will be beneficial, avoiding things that will be painful, like that. So the shastras that we have, which are also like, how should I say, tips of the iceberg. In other words, they represent the essential books that are sufficient, necessary and sufficient for informing us and giving us faith to act in a certain way that in some ways seems counterintuitive, because it goes against the idea of immediate pleasure, right? We want to do something, we're habituated to do something, but then we learn, no, this is against your own best interests. The old Shreyas and Preyas, I think I mentioned to you I was going to give a lecture on that when I get a chance to do the Sunday lecture again. It may be in, who knows, 2024. I don't know when they're going to ask me again. But I'm going to, because that's so central. Shreyas and Preyas. The animals don't know nothing about Shreyas, right? When you go down, 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 it's all Preyas. What's the immediate benefit? And they're working on that paradigm. But that's not the place where human beings should be, because we have an opportunity to really reach a state of consciousness, a state of existence that's way beyond this duality of pleasure and pain, and up and down, and birth and death, and old age and disease, and all of this constant change, which ultimately puts us in a position of helplessness before the material energy. All our plans ultimately are dashed just by the force of time. You really can't achieve anything on the material platform, because it's a false promise of nature, of Maya she's giving you. So this is why one of the most important aspects that Arjuna wanted to know was, what is knowledge, and what is the goal of knowledge? What's the purpose of it? Because there's all kinds of knowledge that don't lead to the knowable, the super soul, transcendence, right? I mean, there's all kinds of whole fields of material knowledge, technological knowledge, which seem to be, all right, now we're getting control of nature. Now we, the AI, oh, this is a whole new field of control, and we got to watch out, it will be controlled, and but it completely absorbs you, and you can spend all your time in there, and you have no inkling of this other kind of knowledge, the spiritual knowledge. So that's why there's jnana, and then there's vijnana. There's realized knowledge that is not just book knowledge. So Krishna is just summing up here, and Prabhupada wonderfully sums it up in this purport, how the chapters progressively took us through what is the body. Well, the body is made of these elements, right? We had a big list there, Mahabhutas, the earth, water, fire, ether, and then there's the subtle things, the mind, intelligence, ego. This is all part of the field that we work with. And then there's the knower of the field, which turns out to be the knowers of the field, right? There's the individual knower and the super knower. Krishna says at the beginning, I'm also the kshetrajna in everybody. And that comes up later with the whole idea of the super soul and what the super soul does. So then he's just reviewing here, a little summary, and probably goes into a little more detail. And then, mat bhakta etad vigyaya. Here's a very important point, that only my devotee can actually understand these things in depth, can get vigyan of what these things are. Otherwise, they remain theoretical. They remain an interesting element of Hindu philosophy or whatever. You may put it in a corner, but it doesn't really pertain to you and your daily life and what's important and what you should strive for. It's not life-changing. So, then what's the advantage of understanding? Madbhavayo papadite. He attains to my nature, means my planet, my state of existence. In other words, one can get out of all of this relative world of pleasure and pain and time. There's no time in the spiritual world. There's a wonderful verse I'll just share with you as an interlude. Some of you maybe know it. Near the end of the Brahma Samhita, which is an essential book, Lord Chaitanya, he found in his trips to South India, he brought back 2 books. The Brahma Samhita and Krishna Karnamrita. One is a summary of the philosophy of the Bhagavatam, that Brahma Samhita. And the other is totally the rasa, is the nectar book. So at the end of that Brahma Samhita, the Song of Brahma, he describes in 2 verses the spiritual world. Beautiful verses. It says, Shriya Kanta Kanta Padamaparusha Kalpataravo Dhruma Bhumish Chinda Managana Mahito Yamamatam Kata Ganam Natyam Gamanam Apivangshi Payasaki Chadanandam Joti Padamapitada Swajamapicha Sayatrakshiradi Sravadi Surabhibhyas Sumahan Nimesharakyoba Vajati Nihiyatra Pisamayak Bhaje Shvetadvipam Tamihamiha Golokamitiyam Vidandaste Sandak Chidipatachara Katipaye. So he starts out and he says, Shriya Kanta, that the beloveds of Krishna, there are all goddesses of fortune. Shriya Kanta, Kanta Padama Purusha. And the one beloved is the Parama Purusha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then he said, Kalpatara Dhruma. All the trees are desire trees. All the water is nectar. All the walking is dancing. All the talking is singing. And one can always hear that flute, the dear friend of Krishna, in the background. And everything is glowing with Chidananda, with a spiritual blissful potency, which you can directly taste. And who knows how that works? I don't know, but... And then it says, Sayatra Chirabdi, the Surabhi cows, they're so blissful, they're always soaking the ground in milk, they're walking. And then, not a second passes there. There's no past, there's no future. There's only the present. Nobody gets old, nothing becomes, all the changes we have here, which make it a place of birth, death, old age, and disease, aren't there. And then only a few realized souls in this world can understand that place. That's the end of it. So that's where we belong. That's where we came from. How did we get here? The world of relativity, of duality, of past, present, and future, of birth, old age, disease, and death. we didn't want to cooperate. We became a disturbing force there, a disturbance, because we were, not wanting to serve, not wanting to take our pleasure wholly and solely in the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's what real bhakti is. This little phrase, I know no one will ever memorize it, I often forget it, but it condenses the whole essence of bhakti in that one phrase. Bhajaniya Padama Purusha Sukha Matra Swasukatvam. It's like a mini little Anyabhilashita verse. So the Bhajaniya, the worshipable Padama Purusha, that's the Supreme Person, Krishna. Bhajaniya Padama Sukha Matra, only the happiness, only in the happiness, in the pleasure of that Supreme Person. Swasukatvam, does one take one's own pleasure. Now that may seem like, a world of slavery. And what about me? Where's my happiness? But don't forget, it says, take your happiness. And we are part and parcel of Krishna. He's Anandamaya Vyasat. He's always blissful. And the way he enjoys bliss is by interacting with all of his servants and his lovers and his mother and everything. It's rasa. Isn't that the reflection of happiness in this world is really in that? Even if it's only a perverted rasa with inanimate things, right? Passion for the video game. It's like, it's not real rasa, but it's a good it's a good imitation, and it's so addictive because I'm a schlump, but in my avatar, I'm a hero. I'm killing this, I'm destroying that planet. I'm saving the damsel in distress. I don't know, did I have video games like that? Probably not. You don't know. You're fortunate. You know. I remember way back when Pac-Man came out. I have to be honest. I was in a grocery store. Everything, there was nothing at home. It was all in the grocery. And there was this Pac-Man machine. All right, let me try it. I put it. And it was eating, right? It was. Yeah, and I wasted a good 5 minutes on that thing. But it's come a long way, right? But it's just Maya. It's actually an epitome of Maya. It's a false reality that you get absorbed in, becomes addictive, and then tragic stories, as you may have heard. And we don't know because we're here in the United States. But what I've read, I don't know directly, but in places like South Korea and Japan, much faster, much cheaper internet, right? You can go to
India, it's almost free.
Even in India. So you can imagine, going to these internet stores, and then you sit there, and you're playing it, and it has happened more than once. Guys playing, 13 hours go by, he transcends the needs of the body and the poor guy keeled over and died. Yeah, at the keyboard, and the people next to him just, okay, he's having a hard time, but I'm absorbed. They didn't even do anything. It's happened more than once. So that's Maya concentrated, so you can see the absurdity of it. We are, even in ordinary just life, you get absorbed in a certain identity, in a certain series of pleasures that you have, things that you avoid, the children, it's a big source of pleasure, but also pain. And your life goes on like that, and you try to adjust things as far as possible so that you have the maximum amount of comfort and you get through. But it's the same thing. The mind gets absorbed in this unreality. It's like Sariputta once came up with this analogy that what we call real life is actually a what do they call it when it's virtual reality. Virtual reality. Our senses, our mind, the eyes and everything, they're not our real eyes and real brain, right? This is all just a simulacrum. And we're totally identifying with it, just like you do if you get so absorbed in the virtual reality that you think you're traveling to the moon or whatever it may be. It's just like that. So this knowledge.
Virtual reality, but where we live also.
I'm sorry?
Is this also virtual?
That was the idea. That what we call real reality is just a very finely tuned, expertly created virtual reality by Maya, created by Maya. It's Maya Devi. So back to our verse. So Krishna is summarizing, and the result of all of this, and you go through verse 8 to 12, and it's, there's quite a list there. Amanitvam, adambitvam, ahimsa, chantara. All these seem to be qualities, but they're listed under knowledge, because you can't get real knowledge, transcendental knowledge, without having these qualities. Pridelessness, surrendering. Arjuna had to say, now I papannam, I surrender unto you. I'm not going to give you a big argument anymore based on the so-called Vedas. I realize it's not working. So I accept you as my spiritual master. No longer friend to friend, but whatever you say, I'll accept. So that's the beginning, amanatvam, freedom from false pride. And adambhata means hypocrisy, pretending you're something you're not. And on, acharyopasanam, worshipping the acharya, the relationship with the spiritual master, which is in the morning classes. We're going through that now a lot. You offend the spiritual master like Indra, and you become disempowered, because Krishna is pleased. This yasya prasadat bhagavat prasada, yasya prasada nagati gatovi. By the grace of the spiritual master, who's pleased with service, inquiry, progress, in other words, doing the right thing. But if you insult, he didn't get off his throne to offer obeisances to his guru who came in. So the guru didn't curse him or anything. He just turned on his heel and walked out the door and disappeared. Now suddenly they said, oh, what have I done? They tried to find Brahaspati, couldn't find him. And so they became weak, and the demons had nicely served their Shukracharya. And so they were strong, and so they came back, and they were all injured. It's a whole thing. And so what to do? So they had to go to the Dichi and see if you can beg him for his body, so that from his bones they can make a special vajra or a thunderbolt for Indra, and it'll become invincible like that. Can you imagine having to do that? That's it. Forget it. Just chant Hare Krishna. I'm not going to, ask someone for his body to make his bones. But that was the advice of, I think, Brahma or Krishna. Anyway, that's the morning class. But so one can attain to the spiritual platform if one follows this. My bhakta, my devotee, follows these instructions, and he can attain to my nature. So that's the inducement. We want to go back to God, and we need to master this chapter. Okay, any questions on text 19? Let us sally forth. Prakatim purusham chaiva vidyanadi hubhavapi vikarangscha gunangschaiva vidhi prakati sambhavan. Excuse me. Material nature and the living entities should be understood to be beginningless. Their transformations and the modes of matter are products of material nature. Purport. By the knowledge given in this chapter, one can understand the body, the field of activities, and the knowers of the body, both the individual soul and the supersoul. The body is the field of activity and is composed of material nature. The individual soul that is embodied and enjoying the activities of the body is the Purusha, or the living entity. Now, Prabhupada would sometimes use that word enjoy to mean experience, because clearly, sometimes we suffer the activities of the body. He is one knower, and the other is the supersoul. Of course, it is to be understood that both the supersoul and the individual entity are different manifestations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The living entity is in the category of his energy, and the supersoul is in the category of his personal expansion. Both material nature and the living entity are eternal. That is to say, that they existed before the creation. The material manifestation is from the energy of the Supreme Lord, and so also are the living entities. But the living entities are of the superior energy. Both the living entities and the material nature existed before this cosmos was manifested. Material nature was absorbed in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Mahavishnu, and when it was required, it was manifested by the agency of the Mahatattva. Similarly, the living entities are also in him, and because they are conditioned, they are averse to serving the Supreme Lord. Thus, they are not allowed to enter into the spiritual sky. But with the coming forth of material nature, these living entities are again given a chance to act in the material world and prepare themselves to enter into the spiritual world. That is the mystery of this material creation. Actually, the living entity is originally the spiritual part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, but due to his rebellious nature, he is conditioned within material nature. It really does not matter how these living entities or superior entities of the Supreme Lord have come in contact with material nature. The Supreme Personality of Godhead knows, however, how and why this actually took place. In the scriptures, the Lord says that those attracted by this material nature are undergoing a hard struggle for existence. But we should know it with certainty from the descriptions of these few verses that all transformations and influences of material nature by the three modes are also productions of material nature. All transformations and variety in respect to living entities are due to the body. As far as as spirit is concerned, living entities are all the same. So, Prabhupada says it's a mystery. There's a mystery of this creation. And this idea that we as well as the material and the energy are eternal, that may be a little puzzling at first. Because you have to understand that there's this idea of manifest and unmanifest. The Mahatattva and even the Pradhan is the unmanifest stage of the material energy. Unmanifest means that it can't be seen. It's not manifest on this plane. It's not interacting as we know it to be. It's just static. It's just like the example, you go in the kitchen, assuming everything is really like spotlessly clean, everything is in place there, There's been a Maha cleanup, everyone got together, and for 2 days, it's really nice. And all of the ingredients are there, and also in this little storeroom in the back. But nothing's getting cooked, because there's no cook, right? The cleaners were there, and now we're waiting for the cooks. So it's like that. There's all of these ingredients, but they're unmanifest. They aren't really doing anything. But then, with the glance of Mahavishnu and the entrance of the living entities, especially, of course, first Garbhodaksha Vishnu expands. Then you have Lord Brahma, a living entity certainly, and he's marshaling his forces, which basically is he's getting it all from his body. When he creates, the first beings he creates are all from his mind. If you read it, that's what he's got to work with. So, but it's the same energy. We are also the energy. We're Prakriti. We are called marginal. Lord Chaitanya answered this question. Sanatana Goswami answered the question we should all come to ask, this preceptor, who am I? Who am I really? And why am I suffering? You should never think in negation and say, well, I'm good. I'm not suffering all the time. Ups and downs. No, ultimately it's a complete downer. Dukkha-aliyam ashashvatam. It's a place of misery, and it's temporary. Meaning that even if you think, all right, I've navigated pretty well, I've got my act together. No. Whatever act you got together is temporary. You're moving toward dissolution, destruction. Repeatedly, again and again. This is not our home. That's our, we have to be convinced of that. So the understanding all of this, Lord Chaitanya says, he answers the question, who am I? Actually, and it's a classic question, Jivera Swarupoi. The word Swarup means your real form, who you really are, not this external. Jivera Swarupoi, Krishnera Nityadas, an eternal servant of Krishna. And that goes for every living entity. He said the jiva, there's uncounted jivas. And that he continues. Krishnera tatasta shakti beda bed prakash. This is all in answering the question who the jiva is. And we are manifestations, or we are the tatasta shakti of Krishna. What is that? It's also spiritual. We're also spiritual energy. But because we're minute, we have a tendency to be enamored of the external energy. Unlike Krishna and his expansions. And so that's why we're in between. And we, living entities, have made the decision, our own decision, become absorbed in the material energy, and we've forgotten all about Krishna and the internal energy and that verse I described. That's our real home. We've forgotten about that. That seems like a phantasmagoria, and this seems real. But actually, this is the phantasmagoria, and that's reality. We have to understand that. So how to realize this? So it's not easy because we're also in a kind of a prison house. We're conditioned by our own body, our own mind. Just like I'm sure you know, the post-traumatic stress syndrome. So there's a lot of things that fit under that. Your mind is a material thing. And it can be traumatized so that you're carrying that some trauma with you on and on. It may be 10, 20, 30 years later, but you remember that accident, or you remember that you're a veteran. It often happens to veterans. You go through wars, and you come out. And you're damaged. Your physical body may be perfectly okay, but your mind, if you hear a car backfire, you think that you're under fire. You may duck. You may go. It's scary. So there's all of these subtle levels in which our conditioning takes place. So all of that needs to be. We have to aspire to transcend it. But in order to transcend our imprisonment within this material energy, right, the spiritual energy within the material energy, we have to know the art of using the material energy in such a way to get out of it. That's called bhakti yoga. That is what does it say? Iha yassa hare dase karmana manasagara nikalashryavastastu jivan muktasa uchite. Prabhupada would love this verse. So iha with long I and long A doesn't mean here. It means your activities. It's Sanskrit language. One whose all of his activities he gives a little list. Karmana manasagara. Karmana is your active senses, hands, feet, especially voice. Manasa, your mind, and gira is mentioned separately, your voice. So all the senses, all of them, Nikalashryavastasu jivan mukta, if they are engaged in the Hare Dase, the activities iha of all the senses, and dovetailed in Krishna's service, then you become a liberated soul even while in this material world. That's called the jivan mukta. Because the definition of mukti given in the Bhagavatam, there's a little table of contents in the Bhagavatam in the second canto. I think it's in the 10th chapter. It tells what are the 10 subjects of Bhagavatam. And one of them is mukti. And for each thing, it gives a little description. So this one is the most famous. What is real mukti? It's not merging into Brahman. So what it says is mukti hitpa annita rupam swarupena bhavastati. Notice the same word, swarup. So mukti is defined as becoming free of all these other forms. In other words, we've occupied, even in this one body, so many forms of this body. What to speak of all the thousand, all of those are not us. They're not our swarup. And you can tell because we cast it aside. Even in this one body, we're no longer children, on and on and on we go. So mukti hitpa, giving up, anyata rupam, other rupas, other forms, like this one. And being swarupena vivastati, firmly situated in one's swarup. Now, even with it, when in this body, you can be in your swarup if your consciousness is exalted, like the great devotees. They're living on two planes. They're really living in their, they're consciously in their specific relationship with Krishna. And it may be male form, female, but maybe a gopi, whatever it may be. But externally, they have, the body that they were born with, it's aging, and they're using it to serve Krishna, and in greatest sense, to help others serve Krishna. That's also great service. So that's the definition of mukti, and it does not have to wait for us to leave this body. So that's an important aspect, and it really is the bhakti definition. It doesn't just mean being free from birth, old age, disease, and death. Because unless you are situated in your original form, then you're not free of birth and death. This is the verse of the demigods praying for Krishna in the womb just before he takes birth. They come down into the chamber, into the, what does he call it? Dungeon? Prison house. They can't be seen, and they're offering these prayers. And they say, what does it say? Oh, God. Yenye ravindaksha vimuktamaninas tvayasta bhavan avishuddha buddhya aruha kuchena padang padartata patantyadho anadvijayushmarangaya. This is a verse that is defeating the idea of the Mayavadis that liberation simply means to chuck off this body, get free of the body, and be situated in Brahman, and that's the end of it, without any form. Nirvishesha. That's the Nirvishesha that Prabhupada saved us from. No details. That's the Mayavadis. But the problem is that their consciousness is not yet purified. They may be, by greater effort, have purified their minds of desire for sense gratification. That's for sure. But they haven't really purified it of the desire to be God. Because they're saying, oh, this is God. Brahman is the ultimate God. And we are also Brahman. Aham Brahmasmi. So if I can just, through Kritrena, through severe austerities, curb down the urge of the senses and the mind, by yoga, I can transcend Parampadam, go to the Brahman, the Brahmabhuta. I'm liberated. We're good, And he says, Aruha Kritrena Parampadam. By this severe austerity, a few can go up to the Parampadam. But what happens? Patanchado. They come down again because Anadvita Yushmarangraya. They are averse to serving your lotus feet. In other words, they've not awakened their actual intrinsic relationship with Krishna, where you can live forever in that rasa, and actually be in the spiritual world. They deny that reality, and so they're unfortunate. Unless they meet Lord Chaitanya, then they're all converted and they become bhaktas. So oh boy, it's getting late. So he's describing, and Prabhupada is describing the nature of material nature, that it's and are also being prakriti, which is interesting because in 2 verses that prakriti is going to be described as purusha. I know, I'm sorry, we'll definitely get to it tomorrow. Purushak prakatisto hi bhunkte prakriti jangonan. Who is that purusha at the beginning of 22? That's us. We're prakriti trying to be purusha. Purusha is the enjoyer. That's the problem. We're not in our nature, you see. So it's situated in, and then bhunkte here means enjoying? No, it means enjoying and suffering. Prakriti jangunan, we're experiencing. So as we associate with this material energy, beginning with our own body and mind, that will determine our destiny. That's the whole idea. Sadasad yoni janmasu. Good and bad births, Well, the best birth of all is no birth at all. But if the best, birth that you probably get is a birth in a devotee family, and move substantially toward your glorious destiny of going back to Godhead. So, any discussion on these points? Sorry, we've kind of been all over the map, but I love this part of the Bhagavad Gita.
I don't know if it's related, but I was curious about the concept of bodhisattva.
Bodhisattva.
So is it like a Brahman that falls again, or is more, is there that concept first off in Krishna consciousness? Because I did other type of yogas and bodhisattva that comes up. But is there anything related to what you explained?
Well, I have to be honest. I've never studied bodhisattva. That sounds like Zen Buddhism or something?
Well, bodhisattvas, there tend to be like enlightened beings that will come down again on earth to help the others. So, they don't need to be reincarnated again, but they decide to help. So I was wondering if any of the...
Well, we have a similar thing.
Okay, so I was curious.
Which is called the Nitya Siddhas, who are eternally perfect, but they come down to teach bhakti. They're sent by Krishna, and it's quite a service because they're in the spiritual world and enjoying. But Krishna, he's concerned. He wants to save us, And we just had Gaur Purnima, so Lord Chaitanya is one of Krishna's main reasons for coming as Lord Chaitanya was Anarpita Chadim Chadat, Karunayavatirnaku, to give the highest levels of bhakti in a way that the poor Kali Yugais could actually take it up. Don't worry about your qualifications. Whatever you did yesterday, that's yesterday. We don't care. This is Jagai Marai. But you have to give up your sinful activity and chant Hare Krishna. And they, of course, took shelter of Lord Chaitanya, became great devotees. So Lord Chaitanya himself, he's not a bodhisattva or anything like that. He's not even a Nitya Siddha. He's God himself. But he also sends others who are, to help him from the spiritual world. And we understand our great acharyas are like that. They didn't lead very sinful lives and all that, but they came down, and often they're born in devotee families, and they get, and then they manifest their wonderful preaching platform, profiles. So it's a similar thing, but this side, in bhakti, you always got to talk about the relation with the Supreme Person, and that it's based on the love, and the pure love for Krishna. Ultimately, it's also expressed in love for all living entities, and especially those who have a chance in the human form of life to be saved from all the suffering. And now that's the mood of Prahlad Maharaj, who very much embodies the mood of the Gaudiya Vaishnava preaching. In the 2 verses near the end of his prayers to Lord Nrsingadev, he says, as far as I go, as myself, Naibod Vijay Padadodatya Vaitaranyas Tvadvi Yagayana Mahamata Magna Chitta. I am not at all disturbed, and he proved it by remaining completely fixed and undisturbed, even his father's horrible tortures and attempts to kill him. He was transcendental to it. Krishna saved him. So, not udvijay. Udvijay means disturbed. I'm not disturbed at all, because I'm with you, and you're across the river Vaitarani between the material and spiritual world. So I'm in the spiritual world already, even though my body may be here. And then he says, and I can be completely blissful at any time. Twadvi yagayana mahamata magna chitta. Magna chitta means I can immerse my consciousness in your glories by chanting about them, hearing. But virya gayana, virya means powerful activities. He's talking to Nrsingadev. Singing them and hearing them, then I become very blissful just in that absorption. So I have no problem. He can really say, I'm good, no problem. But then the next line belies that. Shoche Shoche means lamenting. I'm lamenting. Why? You're Prahlad. Shoche tato vimukacheta indiyata maya sukaya bodhamudbhato vimudhan. Because of all these fools and rascals who are vimukachetasa. Literally means turning their face away from you. They've forgotten you. They're ignoring you, my Lord. And therefore, they're trying to eke out this illusionary happiness from illusion, Maya. Maya Sukaya Bodham, bearing the great burden of trying to get these little drops of pleasure. And so, the next verse, he clinches it. Prayena deva munayosava mukti kama maunam charandi bidane naparata nishta. For the most part, these transcendentalists, they're out for their own mukti. And what does he call it? Mukti kama. It's a material desire, just to be free of birth, old age, disease, and death. There's nothing inherently spiritual about that, because we're doing it in a foolish and ineffective way even now. We even in the material body, we try to put off death, health insurance, and all kinds of things, and don't want to get old. Or let's spread out. Put on. I'll take this pill. Is there a diet so I don't have to get all these, wrinkles? I don't have so many wrinkles, I don't know why. But anyway, I don't care, wrinkles, body. So we're still trying, but we're failing at every moment. You can't stop it. So it's a great burden, and they're suffering. So I'm feeling for them. I see that there's no one but you who can help them, my Lord. So I have to stay in the big cities, and I have to preach. Take the burden, the austerity of preaching to these fools. That's the mood of he's expanded. And anywhere I can be hearing it chanting. And you look at, and blissful, and we saw it with Prabhupada. What did he do? He's constantly chanting. He's chanting his books. He's speaking to the devotees. He's chanting Hare Krishna. He's having some interview. He's just completely immersed in hearing and chanting about Krishna. So he's and at the same time, his body is giving him trouble. Obviously he's 78 years old. But he transcended it all and showed great compassion and heroism and tolerance, just to give, to travel. After a few years, he had all these centers all over the world, and all of them are writing him, "Please come and visit. Please come and visit." So probably sometimes he would periodically say, "Now I'd like to retire and just write," but he never did. He's got another letter. Okay, let me go. And they made arrangements. The writing went on. Speaking, the books came out eventually. But that's the ideal. So that's really bodhisattva. I mean, what does that actually mean? Bodhi means very intelligent, transcendental intelligence, and sattva, mode of goodness. No one could vie for the intelligence and the goodness of the great preachers of Krishna consciousness. Well, we've come to that hour. All right, we have a minute left for a poem. Is that okay? Okay. I can't give a poem, but I'm going to give my other verse, and then hopefully I can write a poem for it. This is about this The return of Krishna from the forest. It's a little, you can learn this one. I think I gave this one last night. Anyway. Denu vrindamana, and you didn't hear it. Denu vrindamana mandamayantam venu gita mamatam visajantam renu rushita talalakavantam kenu bhiksasamayor namadantam. You can see how, that's just one verse out of thousands in the Govinda Lilamrita, but there's many like that. So what he's saying is, Denu is the cows, and Vrindam is herds. So the herds of cows, Krishna's bringing the cows back with all his friends, thousands of cows. So he's walking very leisurely behind these cows, and he's playing his flute, Venu Gitam, Amritam Visrajantam, and creating these wonderful nectarian sounds and songs with his flute, Venu Gitam, Amritam Visrajantam. And while this is all happening, this big cloud of dust, very auspicious dust, this Braj, is being upraised by the cows, and it's powdering his hair, his whole body, but it mentions his hair. Renu Rushita, powdering. Chalalakavantam, his curly black shiny hair that's moving back and forth as he walks, that's Chalalakavantam. And then, so here's the scene. So it says, Kenu, who indeed? Viksha, seeing this sight, Kenu Viksha Samayur Namadantam, will not enter into the state of the highest joy and the highest bliss. Just seeing Krishna coming back. Because, his gopis and his parents and everyone, they stay back in the village, and he goes out with the forest with the boys. So it's all separation. Oh, when is he coming? When is he coming? So they go up to the Chanda Chalikas or something. There's something on the roof where they can stand, with a little railing and look and see. And so they're looking. Is that the dust? Oh, look! Is that the flute sound? Yes, he's coming. Their hearts are beating more. There's a whole ashtaka about this. Maybe I'll share with you sometime. So this whole separation and meeting. That's the whole thing that's going on in the spiritual world. So that's how you can stay happy, even when you're an old man like me. Who cares? The body's going to fall. What are you going to do? All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All right.